The blood-shedding fight between Israel and Palestine over the territory between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea has its roots in history. Now, its new chapter is the surprise attack by the Palestinian militant group Hamas on Israel, which caused an unprecedented assault on Israel at the dawn of the Jewish high holiday of Simchat Torah. Amidst the violence and a cycle of peace treaties, what triggered the current situation? Why was Israel attacked? Let's dive deep and analyze. Palestinian militant group Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel on October 7th, with hundreds of gunmen infiltrating communities near the Gaza Strip. The attack came 50 years and a day after Egyptian and Syrian forces launched a war on the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur to reclaim territory Israel conquered in a brief conflict in 1967. About 1,200 people were killed, while the Israeli army said more than 200 soldiers and civilians, including women and children, were taken hostage in Gaza. More than 14,000 Palestinians in Gaza were killed in airstrikes and shelling carried out by the Israeli military in response. Britain took control of the area known as Palestine after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, which ruled this part of the Middle East in World War I. The land is inhabited by a Jewish minority and an Arab majority, as well as other smaller ethnic groups. Tensions between the two peoples increased when the international community tasked Great Britain with establishing a national home in Palestine for the Jewish people. This arose from the Balfour Declaration of 1917, a commitment by the then Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to British Jews. This declaration was enshrined in the British Mandate for Palestine and ratified the newly formed League of Nations, the forerunner of the United Nations, in 1922. For Jews, Palestine was their ancestral homeland. The Palestinian Arabs also claimed the land and protested the decision. From the 1920s to the 1940s, the number of Jews fleeing persecution in Europe, particularly the Nazi massacres of World War II, increased. Violence between Jews and Arabs and against British rule has also increased. In 1947, the United Nations resolved to divide Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state, and to make Jerusalem an international city. This plan was accepted by the Jewish leaders but rejected by the Arabs and was never implemented. So what was the driving force behind the creation of Israel? In 1948, unable to resolve the issue, Britain withdrew, and Jewish leaders declared the establishment of the State of Israel. It was intended as a refuge for Jews fleeing persecution, as well as a homeland for the Jewish people. Fighting between Jewish and Arab militias has been intensifying for months, and the day after Israel is declared a state, 5 Arab countries attack. Thousands of Palestinians have been displaced or forced from their homes in what they call al-Nakba, or catastrophe. When the war ended with a ceasefire the following year, Israel controlled much of the territory. Jordan occupies the land known as the West Bank, and Egypt occupies Gaza. Jerusalem is divided between Israeli forces in the west and Jordanian forces in the east. Because there was never a peace agreement, war and struggle increased in the following decades. During the 1967 war, Israel occupied the east. During the 1967 war, Israel occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank, as well as much of Syria's Golan Heights, Gaza, and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Neither they nor their descendants are allowed to return to their homeland from Israel. Israel claims this would overwhelm the country and endanger its existence as a Jewish state. Israel still occupies the West Bank and claims all of Jerusalem as its capital, while Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of a prospective Palestinian state. The United States is one of the few countries that recognizes this city as the capital of Israel. Settlements are considered illegal under international law. This is the position of the United Nations Security Council and the British government, among others, although Israel denies this. The disputed area sought is the Gaza Strip, a narrow strip of land between Israel and the Mediterranean Sea, but with a short border with Egypt to the south. Approximately 41 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide, this island has a population of over 2 million people, making it one of the most densely populated places on Earth. After the 1948-1949 war, Gaza was occupied by Egypt for 19 years. Israel occupied Gaza in her 1967 war and remained there until 2005, during which time it built Jewish settlements. Israel withdrew its troops and settlers in 2005 and maintained control of its airspace, shared borders, and coastline. The United Nations still considers it to be occupied territory by Israel. Have there been any efforts to solve these problems so far? From the 1990s to 2010, 4,444 peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians took place intermittently, interspersed with 4,444 outbreaks of violence. At first, a negotiated peace seemed possible. A series of secret negotiations in Norway became the Oslo peace process, forever symbolized by the 1993 White House lawn ceremony, presided over by President Bill Clinton. In an historic moment, the Palestinians recognize the State of Israel, and Israel recognizes its historical enemy, the Palestine Liberation Organization, as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. An autonomous Palestinian Authority has been established. However, cracks quickly appeared when then-opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu called Oslo a deadly threat to Israel. The Israelis have accelerated plans to settle Jews in the occupied Palestinian territories. The emerging Palestinian militant group Hamas recently sent suicide bombers to kill Israel, to destroy the chances of a deal. The atmosphere in Israel deteriorated, culminating in the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin by a Jewish extremist on November 4, 1995. During the 2000s, efforts were made to restart the peace process, including in 2003, when a roadmap was drawn up by Israel with the ultimate goal of a two-state solution, but this has never been realized. Peace efforts finally failed in 2014 when talks between Israelis and Palestinians broke down in Washington. The most recent peace plan, prepared by the U.S. when Donald Trump was president, was called the Deal of the Century by Prime Minister Netanyahu, but was rejected by Palestinians as unilateral and never looked at. Gaza is ruled by Hamas, a militant group determined to destroy Israel and listed as a terrorist group by the UK and many other countries. Hamas won the last Palestinian election in 2006 and took control of Gaza the following year, ousting President Mahmoud Abbas's rival Fatah movement in the West Bank. Since then, Gaza militants have waged several wars with Israel. Israel, along with Egypt, maintains a partial blockade of the Gaza Strip to isolate Hamas and try to prevent attacks, especially indiscriminate rocket fire into Israeli cities. 4,444 Palestinians in Gaza say Israel's restrictions and airstrikes on populated areas constitute collective punishment. This year has been the bloodiest on record for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. They also complain about restrictions and military action taken there in response to deadly attacks on Israelis. These tensions may have been one of the causes of the latest attack by Hamas. But activists may also have sought to increase their popularity among ordinary Palestinians, including by using hostages to pressure Israel to release some of the 4,500 detained Palestinians detained in the country's prisons. So who supports Israel in the current conflict and who doesn't? The United States, the European Union, and other Western countries all condemned Hamas's attack on Israel. The United States, Israel's closest ally, has over the years provided the Jewish state with more than $260 billion in military and economic aid, and has promised to provide more equipment, anti-aircraft missiles, guided bombs, and ammunition. It also sent 2 aircraft carrier strike groups to the eastern Mediterranean to prevent Israel's enemies, especially the Lebanese Hezbollah movement, from opening a second front in the war. Russia and China both refuse to condemn Hamas and say they maintain contact with both sides of the conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin blames U.S. policy for the lack of peace in the Middle East. A U.S. effort in 2023 to help broker a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia was thrown into chaos by the October conflict. Israel's archenemy Iran is Hamas's main backer, as well as Hezbollah, whose militias have exchanged gunfire with Israeli forces almost daily since the Hamas attack. Questions were raised about Iran's role in the Hamas attack after reports it had given the green light days earlier. However, Tehran denies any involvement. Along with all these fringe and warring alliances, there are many issues on which the two sides cannot agree. What will happen to Palestinian refugees? Should Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank remain or be eliminated? Do the two sides share Jerusalem? And perhaps the most delicate and controversial is whether a Palestinian state should be established alongside Israel. So that's it. What do you think about the vicious cycle of war and peace accords benefiting, separating, and shaping the geopolitics? And at exactly the cost of whom these insurgencies prevail? Comment your thoughts. Do hit the like button and subscribe for more such Geopolitics Explained.